Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you back to Hudson River Computing and Acumatica Lunch and Learn. This webinar is going to kind of go in a little bit more in depth than we did in the last one to show a little bit more what the product actually looks like and some of the features of the product that we didn't show before. So it's kind of the gist of this particular one. So we're going to go through a short slideshow. Promise it won't be very long this time. And we're going to just talk about who Hudson River is again real quick as a reminder. Some of the kind of key points from the previous webinar, and then we'll get right to the demonstration of the product. So that's kind of the goal for today. So Hudson River Computing was founded in 1993. We concentrated initially on accounting and ERP products. Back then, the products were a lot simpler and had much less ability, but again required more technical ability than we do, for example, for the cloud pieces. So we've kind of come a long way. Our staff has been with us for a long time, a lot of them, and what it is that experience becomes important. They have experience in different industries as well as scenarios of working with a lot of different clients for different things. So we work primarily our client base is nonprofit, distribution, and manufacturing. So those are kind of the big ones we do. We do have other clients for associations and things like that as well. We're committed to making sure we offer quality products and our service matches that. It sounds like a minor detail, but if we have a product that doesn't work well, we're the ones sitting across the table from you. So the idea of it is making sure we can offer the products and services that you require. So we currently carry Acumatica and we carry Microsoft Dynamics GP. So those are kind of the two products we carry primarily at this point. And today we're going to be talking about the Acumatica side. A couple things that it's important for you to be aware of as to what's important in your selection criteria for a product. And we're just going to review these real quick. I'm not going to talk in a lot of depth, but the technology is important in the sense that you want to make sure it's relatively mainstream, that it's customizable, upgradable, can run virtually on any device when you're using the product. Whether it's your cell phone or whether it's your tablet or your PC, or Chromebook. So the answer is those become important factors. The functionality, the technology is great, but if the functionality is not there for what you need, the functionality is important. So does the product do what you need it to do? And we do have some clients that are extremely narrow fields, okay, that are extremely unique businesses. And then the question becomes, can you integrate to something else? Okay, or can you then take and or customize pieces of it if you need to? And those become important parts. So the functionality is the core there though. So for example, with Acumatica, it offers from the vendor directly, manufacturing, project accounting, construction, route accounting, as well as fleet management. And those are all directly from Acumatica. There's some nice pieces that we take for granted as well. So we have expense management. So, employees do expense reports now and, it becomes cumbersome. Approvals on those types of things. The answer is, Acumatica has that built in as well. So there's different pieces to this that become important. For the integration part, whether it's a third-party product that you guys need to use because of your industry, some legacy software you're using, maybe something you developed internally, do you want to be able to integrate it in? Maybe it's an entry from your accounting firm at the end of the year. You want to make sure you have the ability to do the integration. And if it's more of a permanent thing you're doing on a regular basis, Acumatica has open APIs that are easy to develop to. It's still secure because it's using basically the same components that you would be using if you're doing the data entry in the system, which means that nobody will be able to access things that they don't have access to, just like if a user wouldn't be able to access it as well. OData integration is important because it allows you to extract information easily to people that you maybe don't want to have in the system. So an example that might be that we've seen happen before where you have a client or a customer and the customer wants to keep updated on the ship dates for the product that they have on order with you. And the nice part about it is instead of having 5 emails go back and forth confirming dates, you could actually have a scenario where, hey, here's a spreadsheet, it's Excel, we're going to give you a login just for that, okay? And basically you refresh this anytime you want, and it specifically shows them their customer information for those orders. So they can see, okay, here's my delivery time frames, here's when we're expecting a ship, etc. So it's a common thing. And the nice part about it is they don't have to have access to Acumatica. It just literally refreshes from Acumatica to the spreadsheet. So that's kind of the theory on that. Last but not least, integration for other things. You have one-off short-term things. Is it easy to integrate or bring in information into Acumatica? And the answer is it becomes a part of your important criteria. If you have a scenario where you get sales orders, maybe they send you the line items of the orders, and there's 50 items and line items. Well, it'd be nice if you could take that from a spreadsheet and import it in. Okay, those kind of short-term, kind of quick imports, as well as kind of ongoing imports. Okay, that allow you to develop very quickly, easily map into the system, and put the data where it requires. So those become important factors of what you need to really look at. Additionally, is the product reliable? Is it based on on a basis that's going to be work very well? So for example, with Acumatica, they're hosted on AWS because it's the most reliable hosting system that's out there right now. So it becomes an important factor of your uptime as well as our support for that as well. Is it based on technology like C# and SQL Server, where basically it's proven technology that works well? Okay, so those reliability factors become important. Vendor support, and that's not just Acumatica, but it's us as well. So you want to make sure that you have that level of support. So what typically happens with the support is that being a local provider or your provider to help implement, we're more familiar with your site than Acumatica would be typically. So the nice part about it is if you call with a scenario, we know the personalities involved, we understand your implementation, we can usually help you more effectively. There are times, however, that, hey, we might say, hey, this is one you contact Acumatica, or we contact Acumatica for you. Could also be a scenario where we need kind of an emergency help, and it's a Sunday night at 2:00 in the morning. The answer is, Acumatica has 24/7 support because they're a worldwide organization. So you have that availability of that dual level of support, right? The customizability becomes important. If you do have something that needs something kind of unique for your industry, for something you're doing, the answer is you need to be able to accommodate that. So if you do actually need customization, can it be done? And then secondarily, can it easily be upgraded so you guys can keep current with the product? And it's important because technology is moving relatively quickly at this point, and if you're not keeping up, it can be kind of an issue. If it doesn't upgrade easily, okay, that can be kind of a problem because it can lock you into a version and then you can start falling behind. So the idea is make it easily upgradable. All right. Are the tools built in to allow you to do some of your own things? For example, we're going to see some dashboards and KPI information on the dashboards and how easy it is to kind of create that. We're actually going to show that today so you can see how it'll work for you in your environment. And last but not least, is a third party for support for things that it makes sense for. So for example, a lot of us probably use DocuSign for contract signing or for other purposes. And so there's integration to DocuSign to be able to allow us to be able to track that status for the contracts within the CRM module, for example. Secondarily, there's other things for like sales tax, where if you deal with a lot of states within the United States, it makes sense to maybe implement Avalara because it's a very simple setup, but then it actually goes right down to the address and knows what the tax rates are all for that. So there's kind of those pre-built links there for those things. And last but not least, if you don't, maybe you're already using Salesforce and you want to stay with Salesforce, it's pre-built links for Salesforce to integrate into Acumatica as well. So those kind of things become very important to have that strong third-party support, the customizability, but also, again, the upgradability and ease of getting it done. And then last but not least, the value of the product. And it's not strictly what the licensing is for the product. It's, what's the value of the product? Does it work fairly easily, et cetera, as you go through? So, we constantly do research on products, and I actually sat through a demonstration of another product yesterday. And one of the things that was interesting is how many clicks it took to do certain functions. And in most cases, Acumatica was probably about a third the number of clicks as what was required in the other product. And those types of things become value and time. Other than that, you also have, for the product itself, the way Acumatica licenses, it's based upon not how many users you have in the system, okay? Because in cloud systems, most of the time it goes by named user. So if you need Bob to approve, 3 purchase orders a month, the answer is, hey, we want to make sure that he has the ability to do that. And because we're not counting Bob as a additional cost, basically, you just have to set Bob up so he has security rights to do it. But the answer is it becomes more cost effective for the organization because your workflow works more naturally. Because a lot of times what happens when Bob only needs to approve 1 or 2 purchase orders a month, for example, in that case, what ends up happening is people say, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have somebody else do that approval instead of Bob, even though Bob's the guy to do it. So people start doing workarounds in their workflow. So it's not effective for the organization and for what you guys want to do. So the licensing by the functionality and the consumption of what the functionality is and volume basically makes more sense from a licensing standpoint and is more effective for the customer, for you. So that's kind of the important part of it. So why Acumatica? I'm just going to keep this short. The future proofing of the platform. This is kind of review, so we're not going to get in a lot of depth, but the idea of it is each one of these blocks basically can easily be substituted and put back in without having to redo all the other pieces. So for example, if when they replaced their core here for the link for HTML5, when they came out with that, all they did was take that block out that connected the browsers to the application, and they replaced it with the HTML5 block. So they didn't have to recode how general ledger entered. They didn't have to recode how it posted. They didn't have to record the core of the product. They had to just record, redo that one piece with the hooks in it. That's true throughout the system. So if they decide to change, some of the mobile framework or the integration web services, they're not recoding the whole system. They're making the changes just to that specific piece, and that block goes in and out. The importance of that is it allows them to keep up with the technology and the functionality that you're going to need over a long period of time. The average system is in use by an organization for typically 13 years. And if you guys know where you're going to be exactly in 2034, let me know. I don't know exactly where I'm going to be, but the idea of it is I don't want to have to change my ERP system or my business process system in 5 years, and because they're falling behind in technology. So it becomes an important piece of that for that long term. Hey, we can make sure we keep up with the technology, functionality, changes the tax codes, et cetera, very easily. That's the theory behind this, and it becomes very important. Okay, something else to look for, analysis tools. The ones that are built in are important, but in addition to that, within Acumatica, we have Acumatica built-in tools, which you're seeing right here where I'm waving the mouse. We also have some others. So we have here Acumatica again, but in this case, we have some embedded ones that are from Power BI. We have Vincent. This is actually the Acumatica one of the dashboards on the cell phone and the app. I'll show you that a little bit later. We have here, some linking into one of the financial reporting tools that are spreadsheet based. There is financial reporting within Acumatica though. Keep in mind, you may not need that. It's just an option. Okay, so the nice part is having these pre-built pieces there. And then in that case, that happens to be Volexo. But you also have, Envisant, you have BI360, Tangerine, a host of others. And like in the case of, Power BI, for example, which is what some of these are here, you can actually embed them within the dashboards within Acumatica. Okay, so, it's kind of an important tool. Being able to access the system from anywhere. Anywhere you have an internet connectivity, whether it's on your laptop, your tablet, your Android device, your Chromebook, your Windows laptop, your cell phone, etc., your watch, if you have a screen resolution there to present something, or being able to give commands and results from Alexa. The answer is it's important to have some of these abilities so you can actually see your information when you need to see it and where you need to see it. And those become important factors there. So that having that device and that linking is important. It only is important, though, is if the system does things you need it to do. And this comes back to making sure that the functionality is there and available for you. Okay, and the idea of it is Acumatica has a broad depth of functionality. Compliance, okay, is it, SOC and PCI compliant, et cetera. Those become important factors, because if you can't, meet basic accounting standards, or you're not PCI compliant and you need that because you're doing credit card processing of some sort, the answer is the system won't work for you. Acumatica has that, and those are important factors if you have those requirements. Okay. Another important piece is, how does the company treat their customers and their vendors? Okay. In the case of Acumatica, they actually have the customer bill of rights. And some of these things, they kind of seem kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of get it and whatever. But there's a couple in here that are really important. One is the pricing as it goes on over time. I've seen some cloud products where they get you in, and the price is a certain amount, and then what ends up happening is you get to like the second or third year when your contract renews, and the product actually will double in price, okay, or more in a couple of cases. And Acumatica is telling you that basically it's not going to go more than 3% higher than that. So the answer is, whatever you're paying, if you sign up today and then you find out, here's what my cost is, when you get 3 years out, when your contract renews, okay, you would discover that, there may not be a price increase, but if there is, it won't be more than 3%. And those become important factors. A lot of deployment flexibility. They're also talking about rapid integrations and things like that, and rapid development. So those all become kind of important pieces for you. Additionally, they're also talking about, their business model. They're not going to randomly change it. We've been through that with other products where they change the licensing model, and sometimes the cost will go up significantly because of the way they change the licensing. If you notice, they're also talking about not changing the licensing model on you here. So those become, important factors for the long term. And keep in mind, most products don't have something like the customer bill of rights to make sure that it's going to work for you in the long run. Okay, so data ownership is important. And what that comes down to is, if you decide to leave the product for whatever reason, sometimes a client, we've had customers really get bought up, and the bigger client says, hey, you know what, you're going to use SAP for this division now, and we're going to get rid of Acumatica. Well, the only issue you have with that is sometimes you need reference after that fact. And in the case of data ownership, what that allows you to do, Acumatica does have an ability to be installed locally if you want to, because of the way their model works. It can be done in trial mode, so you don't even have to pay for it. And what you would end up doing with that is you could actually take your data from your cloud, your cloud. You can actually do a snapshot of it, download it yourself if you want. They will do it for you, but you can do it yourself. And then restore that at the local level, and then you have that ongoing piece to it. So that data piece is really yours. By the same token, I don't know if you noticed now, I mentioned you can do your own snapshot. While the system is going to be continually backed up, and there's a lot of redundancy in how they're set up. There's a minimum of 3 servers involved at any point in time to make sure your data stays where it should be, okay, and it works okay. And from an end user standpoint, you'll never know if one of those servers fails. But the idea of it is, from the data ownership standpoint, you can do a snapshot because there's different reasons why you do it. Maybe you're doing an integration for something for the first time. You're like, you know what, before I run that integration, let me make sure everything's going to be okay. Let me do a snapshot of my data in case I have to put it back. So there's multiple reasons why you might need a backup and a restore. And Acumatica lets you have that control still, even though it's a cloud system. And that's pretty unique for a cloud system. Okay, dual layers of support. We kind of talked about this a little bit before. The layer of us helping you, as well as Acumatica support. That helps to make sure that you're covered in the long run. Embedded integrations, we talked a little bit about this. I'm just going to mention a couple. Power BI, Smartsheet, if you use it, it works well. Avalara for the sales use tax. There's also a Vertex for that as well as login. Office 365 connects, et cetera. So a whole bunch of pieces here. DocuSign, Procore if you're in construction. So there's a whole bunch of these here that help link together. And these are predefined for the most part. You don't have to, worry about coding it or whatever. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean it's not controllable. even though the integrations are predefined, doesn't mean they're not modifiable so that it works better for you, depending on how you're using the different systems. Okay. And I'm just going to summarize here with the differentiators. The future proofing of the platform, like we talked about a little bit earlier, how they have everything in blocks so they can take it in and out and make sure it stays up to date. The best-in-class functionality, those are important parts. It needs to make sure you have the functionality you require, and then the ethical standards, which basically comes back to the customer bill of rights. So those are kind of the three kind of things in the summary here. And then basically Acumatica has actually delivered all these pieces. Okay, so it's got a connected business, it's working, we see it. It's been out for a while now for them. Rapid integrations, we do it all the time for different companies and different organizations, and it's worked very well for them. The remote collaboration, kind of nice how basically we can operate kind of from anywhere. When the pandemic happened, our Acumatica customers had a much easier time than the Dynamics customers in the sense that they had an easier time because they could easily work from anywhere, just like we were talking about on different devices. And when the pandemic first hit, the device thing was kind of important because some people had like an iPad at home. That's what they had. They didn't have a laptop, but you know what? They couldn't get back to the office to get their laptop from the office, or maybe they had a desktop. So there was a period of time in there where they couldn't get hardware to do it. So the flexibility was important. That also helped with the business resilience. Basically, the companies that were doing that, they lost less time. Okay, they didn't have as much effort to reorganize to work from remote scenarios. And then last but not least, that future-proof piece is important. So in quick summary, and then we're gonna get to the demo, I promise. Long-term commitment to our clients. We've had a lot of clients that we've worked for a number of years for and with, so that we've been, with them since, the late 90s, early 90s. Since we started, we have a few customers that, from day one we've worked with still, and they're still customers. Those are important pieces to us. That's why when you're sitting across the table, it's important to have those conversations. We're not totally product centric. Okay, there are times when we say no. Sometimes we just don't have a fit. We continue a little bit further. We have a lot of experience in ERP, and this is what we do. On top of that, that's Acumatica as well. That's all they do. They don't go off and develop databases. They're not developing operating systems. They're strictly developing the ERP piece. It was originally designed for the cloud. Makes a huge difference. Because the way the cloud works is slightly different than the premise-based products of the function before them. And they designed it from the ground up for that to make sure it's future-proof and would work for you. Okay, you'll have access anywhere, anytime, pretty straightforward. Flexible deployment options. We didn't talk about that too much today, but we talked about it last time where you have options to, if you have a particular industry where you don't want to do hosted, most everybody does hosted, but we have other options for that. We talked about the consumption-based licensing. It's not based on users, and that's very important for the ongoing piece. And then basically, empowering of the connected cloud. Other applications, DocuSign, et cetera, taxes, et cetera. So that's kind of the idea on it. So let's get to the demo. Let me close down PowerPoint. I know you guys have all seen enough of that, a lot of PowerPoints over time, and we'll kind of go from there. So I'm going to open up Acumatica. And I'm going to actually log out and back in so you see what it looks like to log in. So I'm going to actually put it in here. We can do login that ties in through Active Directory or Google, those types of things. In this case here, I'm doing single layer authentication, but you can do two-layer authentication as well. I actually have to type my password again because I forgot where I was. Okay, so as I log in, every user has the ability to have a shared dashboard or a different dashboard. Okay, so in this case here, this is the dashboard that I have chosen to come to. It's what they call a customer view. This is one of the default dashboards out of the box, but it's easily customizable. So this is kind of what it looks like. And what we're going to do is we're going to go across the menu and down the menu, and then we're going to talk about how things work within Acumatica a little bit more. Okay, so if we look at the menu, on the left-hand side, we have the menu as we go down through. This will actually open up by modules. Okay, so what this does, it then opens up basically what, kind of a little bit more menu in detail. All right, we're going to come back to that. If I want to go back home to my starting point, that's where I click on the little button in the upper left. That's going to be basically my home button to take me back. If I go across here, okay, you notice there's a search, and there's a search from within Acumatica. So it'll search everything within Acumatica. So it'll search documents, it will search the menu names, it'll search the help files, and it'll search actual file attachments and things like that. So I'm actually going to put in, a scenario where, you get a call from a customer and they say, hey, what's the status of our purchase order? And they gave you the PO number. And I'm going to keep it simple because I can't remember PO numbers. So I made it a simple one, but whatever the number is, say it's JK and their number is 1234. So at this point, notice here, didn't find any menu items for that. And that makes sense. If I click on transactions and profiles, though, you'll notice here it found a sales order, and that's the customer PO number right there. So that's the customer order number is JK1234. So if I click on that now, I can actually click on that. That'll actually take me to the sales order window, and I can basically say anything that I want to say about this particular order. They'll say, oh, what's the status? When did you request it? It's like, oh, you know what? It's going to ship 6:30. So that's when we're expecting it. I save that. Right now it's open. I can actually take this and say, you know what, let me email this to them. So they say, hey, I didn't get the order. I can actually click on the email. It actually goes out, sends the email out for that document, all right, with the attachment. And the nice part about it is I didn't have to work too hard at that, and it just sends it out. So the idea of it is it will come to whoever it's set up to go to. Usually it takes about a moment. Yes. So it needed to do something different there for the save for the item. So you can see here that what I did checkboxed. I have an activity. So in this case here, my activity is my email. And the nice part about this email is now attached to the document within the system. It's not in somebody's Outlook or in their Gmail. It's not sitting off to the side. It's actually embedded in the system. So here, this is a template setup, and these templates can be modified to show the logos and make them more graphical and prettier looking, and you can basically incorporate any data from the document that you want to send to them, and you go from there. And then last but not least, in this case here, we have it attaching as a PDF. So if I click on the PDF, I can see the actual sales order confirmation that went out to the customer. So I can see what happened. And you know what the key to that is? I'm not the only one that can see it in the organization. You can have anybody else that has access to the window can see that, yep, it got sent. Here's the data got sent, and here's that particular item, what it is. Now, the second part of that that's kind of nice. Hang on a second here. Got to drag that down just here so I can close that. The other part that's kind of nice about this is that it allows us to then say, yep, this is the first rendition of it. Suppose I send it out again. All right, because, oh, I made a change. You know what? They asked for a discount. So you know what? We're going to sell it to them for $490 instead of $500. And in this case here, it's going to take a second to calculate. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to email it again. So I can actually go here, say actions, email sales order. It then goes out and sends that email out again. And at this case here, notice now I have two activities. So I can see here's the first time it was sent, and here's the second time that it was sent. So in the second time, you'll see here, whatever it happens to be. If I look at the file and you'll see the attachment, okay, you'll see here that it now says $490. So that becomes kind of an important piece there. So you have that whole history of what's going on there, okay? So does that kind of make sense? So, okay. So that's the way it kind of works. All right, I'm going to close that. So that's kind of the step. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And again, the nice part about it is, regardless of the email system you're using, it's still stored with the system within Acumatica. So you can go back to what you need to do. Now, if I go back here and I hit home, again, it takes me back to my home page anytime I want to go. All right. Here, this actually shows me the history of where I've been. And I broke this earlier today, and I thought it might be fixed, but apparently I broke it. So that'll teach me to do things. So what this would normally show, I can log in as a different user and show you that for a second. Can I? Yeah, I can. So I think I can use, I think I have a login here. Oops, let me try it one more time. Oh, apparently I don't have it, so I won't show you that. But what it does is it shows you the history of all the documents you've been to within the system. And the nice part about it is like, what was I working on an hour ago? And say you went to lunch and you came back, you can easily go back to that particular item in the system so you don't have to worry about it. Whoops, I can't log in at all. Let me type. There we go. So that's what that button does. Here we have the current organizational component we're in. So in this case here, we have different companies and divisions. So we have basically 3 companies and 4 branches within the division. So if we look, Revision 2 is a company, but it doesn't have any subdivisions or any particular divisions or branches, as we call them. You notice here you have Revision 2 products and Revision 2 services, 2 different companies again. But you notice here, in those cases, we have basically 2 different branches, and I'm working within one of them. If I want to change branches, I want to go to retail, I click on that and it takes me to the retail branch just like that. So that's how relatively straightforward that is. So I'm going to go back to wholesale because I know what's going to happen with some of the data later on. Okay. The default date and time. Okay, so this should be in your time zone. So I'm actually in Eastern Standard Time. That's wrong, by the way. Not sure why it's wrong, but the answer is normally that would be showing 12:30 p.m. I don't know why it's showing 9:30, but the idea of it is I can actually set that, and I'll show you how to set that in a little bit. So the idea is here, the date is going to default in on the transactions you enter them. They can be overridden if necessary. Okay, that's kind of the other part. Throughout the system, there's help. So if you notice here, it's context sensitive. So if I click here, I'm sitting on a dashboard. So this is giving me information about dashboards. So if you look here, how to add a line graph, how to add a donut chart, how to add the different types of components or widgets to the dashboard. Down below, it gives you a little bit more thoughts about, kind of in general terms, what are the concepts of developing these different parts of the dashboard? That's what that's about. Down below, we actually have the dashboard reference help. So if I click on that, just to give you kind of an idea what it looks like, this is help throughout the system. All right, so it tells you basically what a dashboard is, what it does, and then down below you can see here are the different components of that. So if I click on chart widgets, I see that, it then tells me basically how to do that or what I need to do for that. So those are the kind of things that become kind of important. So in this case here, I'm clicking a donut chart. If I go down here, it tells you how to set it up. Then you have a line chart, tells you again how to work with it. So the idea of it is it's here and it's throughout the system. So if you're on an accounts payable transaction, it really does help you to get there. All right. In the upper right-hand corner, we have where we can log in, change tenants, okay, which is kind of the level above companies. So I'm going to stay in the sales demo tenant. But under here, I have my profile. And under my profile, this is where I can maintain my own password, because maybe I'm not an admin. I'm admin in this case, but if I was an admin, people could change their own password. Perhaps they need to change their email address. Maybe you change email servers, those kind of things that might happen. If I want to update my password, okay, you can actually set up controls so they have to change their password every so often, meet certain criteria for the complexity of the password, etc. In this case here, the user can control their own password changes and give their own reminder. By the same token, if they forget their password, it can be emailed to them. And then assuming they're not changing their email, but the idea is it'll be emailed to them so they get a window to be able to maintain their own password if necessary. And that's an option. You don't have to do that, but that's kind of the option. Notice here, part of the reason I'm in the time zone, I'm in Pacific time. So I'm going to actually change this to Eastern time. I'm going to type East, and it will change my time up above when I click save. So you get kind of the idea. Here we have product wholesale. That's my default branch, okay? My default warehouse for things if I want to do it. And here's my default homepage. And basically the homepage can be made anything you want within the system. So it can be basically any window because all of them are basically have an address to them. So I'm actually going to click save here so my time changes, okay? So you can see that. But if you notice here, I have customer view, and that's the name of my dashboard, but not all of them have to be dashboard. I can actually go directly to, like, for example, a customer listing or to the customer maintenance window or sales order entry, etc. Because the way the system is set up, everything is a separate reference. So if I click on the address here and I click Control C, and if I go to another browser, I'm going to pick Firefox. I was debating which one to use. And I'm going to bring it down here a little bit. Not now, not now. So I'm going to actually paste this in here. Oops. Okay, so if I take this address and paste it in here, you'll see a couple components to it. It's basically where it's located. Okay, but then within this, it shows me which company I'm in. All right, which screen I'm in, and then who the user is. So now if I just hit and go there, okay, it's going to prompt me for login because I wasn't logged in. So I'm going to log in now, and I'm going to actually put in my password. And in the other browser, oops, you have to type the password correctly though. Okay, so now if you notice, it took me directly to that same screen. And that could be a sales order, okay? And notice it's the same user and everything. It's not like I had to even type that in. So like, for example, if you have somebody you need to have look at a particular sales transaction, for example, like have a question on a sales order, or I have a question on a particular payables voucher or a check or something like that, I can actually send them a direct link to that and ask the question for that with the link, and they can see that in their email and click on it. Now, I just copied and pasted out of the top, but in the window itself, we actually go to tools and we can actually go here to get link, and it shows me the link as well. And I can actually send that link to somebody by using it in an email. So if you notice, it's relatively straightforward. So the idea of it is you have a lot of control over how it works. All right. But the idea of it is you don't have to tell them, oh, go look at, purchase order 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just send them the link, it'll take them to the correct thing. So instead of making sure they hit the right item, you can assure that. Within the user profile, you have email settings. You can put in your typical signatures, similar to what you would do like in Outlook, where you might have, your signature section where, it has your contact information, maybe some links to your Facebook or, LinkedIn pages, those types of things, your logos, those kind of things can all be set up in your signature page. All right, so the idea of it is from an end user standpoint on the other end to your customers or your vendors, they would see basically kind of, if they got it in Outlook, for example, it would look normal to them. All right, that's kind of important. Look, custom locale format, if you have people in different countries, okay, things like that. Maybe you have people that work in the EU versus in the United States. You can actually set the location formatting up by user so that, for example, in EU, they look at dates differently than in the US. Okay, so you can actually change those formats for those type of locations. External identities, again, we talked about that for a second. Notice here you have Google and, et cetera in there. And then here you can actually have it track specific mobile devices you're using. And that can be kind of useful at times, so you can control what hardware people are using for their system. All right, so you can actually control it multiple multiple ways. Okay, so I'm going to hit the home button again. Okay, that takes me back to my dashboard. Then we're going to just talk about the menu as we go down it, and then we'll talk about how the pieces work a little bit more in the dashboard. So if I go down through, you'll see here, these are the kind of the normal menu items. If I look here, I can click on finance, pretty straightforward. And we see things here that are pretty normal. Journal transactions, master financial calendar, that's basically where you control closings and things like that, and et cetera. Allocations, you can have allocations on allocations, charts of accounts, maintenance, and things like that. But say you have different reports, you have different things in here. Notice the menu is fairly short and it has a show all. If I click on show all, it shows me more of the menu. So for example, if I'm looking at trial balances, I'm trying to look at budgets, those kind of things, if you notice on the show less, they weren't there. So some of these pieces aren't there. But maybe I don't need to look at the budgets on a regular basis. I want my screen to be a little shorter. And you know what? I'm not going to manage financial periods because I don't really need to do that. So you know what? I'm going to actually go in here into the setup, and I can control what shows up in my short menu. So if I don't do manage financial periods very often, and I'm not importing consolidated data, and you know what, I do reclassifications once in a while, but you know what, I'm not the one that runs allocations. I can easily change those so it defaults there and I don't see those pieces. Okay, so the idea of it is when I look at that and show less, notice now it's only showing the items that I have marked off to show. So under process, I have reclass transactions. oops, you know what? I really need to have post transactions there and release transactions there because I do that once in a while too. Again, I can very easily maintain my short list. Now, that being said, if I don't have security, let's keep in mind, I'm logged in as admin, which means I have access to everything in here that I have installed and turned on. The key to that is that if I don't have access to make journal entries, I'm not going to see that menu option on the screen. So if you have security set up for different individuals, what will happen is the menus will adjust for those different individuals. All right, so to give you an idea what the journal entry screen looks like, okay, what the windows look like in Acumatica, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of look at, okay, here's a listing of transactions. Okay, and I can very easily kind of look at that. I can export transactions. I can do different things, do analysis. But you know what? I'm going to click on this GL transaction. Okay, and I'm going to look at it and say, yep, here's a GL transaction. You know, it's got several line items in it or more. You know, the idea of it is, you know what? I need to make a copy of this. And there's different ways to do that. So if we take a look here, I'm looking at the transaction. I can actually do a copy and paste. So I can actually click on it and do copy, click the plus, and then do paste. And it's basically creating a duplicate of that particular entry. Relatively straightforward, it only took a moment, all right? The difference is, notice the one that was there was basically posted, okay? It was released. In this case here, it's balanced, which means it's still a working document, so I can make changes to it as necessary. And maybe I have, you know what? I need to take a file and put it onto that. So you know what? This is a transaction. I want to put a file on it. I can actually grab a file, drag it anywhere here, and attach the file. So that's all there is to it. So in this case here, I attach the document, that file is attached to it. I can do what I need to do with it. So the nice part about it is it's very easy to do that. As we go a little bit further, you'll notice here I have notes. I can put whatever I notes in here, you know, whatever I want. Okay. The piece of paper was blank. I click OK. The piece of paper is not blank anymore. If I had activities against this, maybe I emailed it to somebody, those kind of things that we did before, we can do different things to it. We can set up tasks, we can send it to somebody, you know, make them, you know, set up a timer. Hey, you have to look at this by tomorrow, those kind of things for people who are in the system. If I have rights, I can customize the window. Okay, so that when I say customization, that's like adding fields, rearranging the header, those kind of things. If it's customization, and you know what, I don't do project pieces, I can actually drag that out here. And these aren't considered customization. This is just tailoring the system to how I work, right? So on a day-to-day basis, I can change kind of these tab orders and all. You know what? I don't need that cost code either because that's related to project. So the idea of it is I can very easily rearrange these pieces, all right, to how I want to work. All right. Now, the other part is another way I could copy this entry is a little bit different. I just did a copy and paste. I could also do this where I can see, notice here's an Excel. I can export the line items to Excel. This will take a second. And I'm going to just open that so you can see I didn't cheat. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually make a change to this. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take this file, and you know what, I'm going to change one of the amounts so you can, a couple of the amounts, I need it to balance. So we're going to look at this, numbers are numbers, letters are letters. As we go across here, again, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so you can see some of the things here. But you know, so in this case here, if I change the amounts, okay, I'm going to actually add 10,000 to, or let me take 10,000 away from this. Okay, so we're going to make this 3981. Okay, hopefully I did that right, so I don't unbalance everything. And our total here is 1,877,000. And then basically I need to then take away 10,000 here. So we're going to make this 24. Okay, and I'm going to just put a total on here to make sure I added correctly in my head. And I did okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to save this entry. All right, so now I can actually create a new entry from this. And I'm going to hit the plus here. And I'm going to do, put whatever document I want in here. I can put in a note description. You know, JK test, everybody knows to stay away from it. Pretty straightforward. I can now click the upload and I can upload kind of a short answer. This part of it works really well for things like where at the end of the year, the accounting firm will give you like a transaction to enter, to make some adjusting entries at the end of the year. Those kind of things, it works really well for. So if I click upload here, it'll take a second, and it's like, what am I going to do with this? And then last but not least, I can just set the mapping up. So if I'm changing the things around, I can change it what it needs to be. Maybe I want the debits and credits to switch. I can do that because I can go credit. So this debit amount's going to go into the credit, and this credit's going to go into the debit, just to show you that I can do it. Okay. So the idea is that's how I actually control the mapping. Now to let this go through, what I do is I click OK, and then it's going to upload those line items in here and create the entry for me. So at this point, it's pretty straightforward. Notice that my debits and credits did flip. Okay. And I can go from there. I can just save the entry. I can make whatever changes I want to it, put additional notes on it. I can even put line item notes. Notice here I have attachments and notes for line items. I can just put in JK test line note, right? So that's separate from the note that we have at the top. Okay. So the idea of it is you have a lot of flexibility as to how you do those. I can click save, and then to release this, all I do is click release, and then it's posted. Assuming I did everything okay. All right, so that's the difference. Okay, so it gives you a lot of flexibility to work how you want to work. So it makes it very powerful and very useful. Now, a couple of things I want to show that people kind of typically run into is expense reports and all, and approvals. Okay, so as we go across here, you notice it says time and expenses. I'm not going to do time today, okay, but you can see here we have time and expenses. So I can enter expense receipts here and claims here, but I can also do it from my cell phone. So the typical is, I just ate out at a restaurant or picked up some fast food for dinner, whatever it is, and the answer is I get to expense it. And the key to it is it also needs to know, okay, do I get to expense it so that I get reimbursed for it? All right, we can set that up as well. Does it get set up so that it goes on my corporate card so I can reconcile my, the accounting department can reconcile my corporate card at the end of the year, kind of like what you do with a bank statement, except for a credit card? Or is it a scenario where, I owe the company money on this? I put it on the company credit card, but I owe them, okay, the other way around. I shouldn't have done it, but I did. Okay. In this case here, we're going to just do kind of a normal expense where basically what's going to happen is I'm going to record that on my cell phone. So if we go a little bit further here, I got to actually just turn on a couple things here on my cell so you can see it. And sorry, I lost my connection here. So now, in a second here, you can see my cell phone. So this is this is the product I'm using. So if I go back to the menu, we'll see here that there's an Acumatica app. I'm on a Droid, but it's basically similar for an iPhone. So we can see here I'm logged in or logging in. I did it with you have the same capabilities to log in this app as you would typically on your cell phone. So I use my fingerprint. You notice here's a whole series of things. So you notice here is the expense receipts and claims. We can see opportunities, leads, sales orders, change orders if we're doing other things for like project or construction. We can look at requisitions, we can do receipts, we can do sales quotes, etc. We can also put in here dashboards and actually have them show data. Okay, I don't have any of those right now, but we can do that pretty easily. So if I have a new receipt, I can actually click on the receipts. And you notice in the bottom right-hand corner, these are the ones I've already turned in along the way. I actually have a plus. And I can say, create a new one, I can just enter it, or I can say capture expense receipt. And what that does is use the camera on my cell phone. And that's what I'm going to do now. So basically, if I go a little bit further here, I'm actually going to pick up this Blaze receipt, which goes back just before the pandemic, but it'll work. So here I can say, okay, that's the basic outline of that particular receipt. I'm going to click the little checkbox. It takes a second. And what it's doing is trying to recognize what's going on the particular receipt. So what it's doing is interpreting it. It doesn't necessarily care that I had a 2-topping pizza and a simple pie from Blaze, but what it's doing is going through and saying, look, I'm looking for the key information. And the key information will probably be, if it's working right, will be, what did it do? I accidentally hit something, I think. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. Hang on. Let me do that again real quick. For some reason, it thought for a minute and didn't think all the way through on it. Okay, so I'm going to pick up Blaze. I'm going to make this a little shorter because it doesn't matter. A little bit wider there. Okay, click the check, and let me see if it recognizes it this time. Okay, so in this case here, you can see here it picked up the description, it picked up the date, and it picked up the amount. Okay, so you can see right here, and I could adjust that. I could actually highlight different things, but I'm just going to click checkbox. And what that does, that puts the receipt in here. Notice it puts the description of Blaze Pizza in here, puts the date in here. And you know what? I don't have to do anything else except for I have to basically tell what the expense item is. Now, if I'm always only doing meals, I can set up the default in, but you know what? I'm going to pick meals, and I'm going to just click checkbox, okay, in the upper right-hand corner, and it saved my expense receipt. Now, that doesn't mean I've turned in the expense report. It means that I put in the expense receipt. So if I go back to my expense claims, I can say, you know what, it's time for me to do an expense claim. I'm going to come in here and say, you know, week of, 6/23, 2021. I'm not typing slashes, this is faster. So there I can actually click on save, but I'm going to actually click on this. I'm going to add receipts. In this case here, we'll see my Blaze receipt. I'm going to select it and then basically click checkbox up in the upper right, go back. And what it's done now, it's added this receipt to my particular expense claim. So if you look right here in the middle, my expense claim total is the 2009, and it includes that item on there. So at this point, I'm going to click save. Okay, so here's my week ending expense. I'm going to click on it again. In this case, what I'm going to do in the upper right hand corner, I'm going to submit. I'm say, yep, it's ready to go. Click submit. So at this point, if I go back to my time and expenses, I'm going to just move this to the side for a second, and I look here at approvals. What ends up happening is, oops, let me see all the records. We'll see here the expense claims that I have in here to be approved. Here's our week ending 6/23/21. Yep, I'm going to approve that. I'm at that level where I approve this person's particular expense, and I'm going to say, yep, it's good, and I'm going to click approve. All right. So the nice part about it is, if I close this expense and I open it back up, or I click on approve, notice it's been approved. I can see it in my system. At this point, what ends up happening is, if I go a little bit further, I can look in accounts payable, assuming I did the right kind of thing, and I can look in my accounts payable, and I should see, okay, hang on a second. Okay, so now we see here my, oh, that's not it. Let me see what kind of a payable, what kind of receipt I had. Let me just see that real quick. Let me see what should have happened with it. So if I do the approve, and let me click on it. And in this case here, period's okay. Well, let me release the claim because it didn't go through. So at this point here, let me release the claim. And what should happen here, it should create the AP document for reimbursement. So the idea of it is, this all kind of happens pretty straightforward. The employee doesn't have to go through and really kind of, pay, tremendous amount of work. It goes through to the other piece. Now, this is a quick check, and basically that kind of flowed right through. And what that means is, basically you can control what controls you have on this being sent to them. You know what I mean, as far as how it's paid. But in this case here, this was a corporate credit card, so it just went in as a quick check, which means it's been paid, but it's on my corporate credit card. So it didn't create the AP, it created an AP transaction, but what it did, it put it in there for reconcile automatically. If it was supposed to be, hey, I get reimbursed for this and they cut me a check or an ACH, for example, it would be set up that way. So the idea of it is, it makes it very powerful and useful. The nice part about the system, I'm actually going to close my share of my screen. Oh, I can show real quick one thing. If I take a look at my approved, it's there. If you look at my completed, if I refresh it, you notice here, it showed that it's going to completed, it's done. So I know that it went kind of from beginning to end. I can see which ones are still either outstanding, et cetera, on my phone as I submit them. So the nice part about it, though, on top of that, is I can see on the web the same information. So if I click on my expense receipts, you'll see here, here's the ones that I scanned in for the Blaze Pizza. If I go to my claims, you'll see on my claims which ones were here. Okay, so you can see how it's been kind of done. All right, so it's very straightforward. All right, so I'm going to close the cell phone. We're going to, kind of go back a ways for that. I'm going to exit the program. We're not going to show that anymore, but it gives you kind of an idea what's there already. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the dashboards a little bit more. And the idea with the dashboard is this is great, except for, you know what? I want to see items purchased the last 12 months. Well, you know what? First of all, let me just glance this and say, yeah, this other category, let's get rid of that for a minute because it's kind of distorting my numbers, right? So if I click here, notice here the legend came up. I'm going to unclose that. I took that out. And you know what? The empty ones are kind of distorting that too. So let me take the empty ones out and close those out. So right now, that's changed that. So you can see here, these are the actual products I'm selling. If I click on any one of these, okay, so if I click on Acer Computer, it drills down and shows me the Acer computers that were sold and what documents and what customers it was. So if I want to see the AR invoice for this, I can actually look back to it. All right. So the idea of it is it becomes very powerful to see, okay, from a display standpoint of a summary back to the detail. And in this case here, we're looking at the AR invoice and what was billed on it. So any notes, if it was sent out, remember if it was emailed, I would actually see the activity there. So those all come back into play here. So the nice part about it is the system is very easy to kind of maintain that way. If I go a little bit further, okay, I can then take and also look at this a little bit more and I say, what are my key 12 customers? Well, you know what? These are my keys. I'm going to look at this and, we're going to do two different things for this. One is I'm going to take this key 12 months, key customers for the last 12 months. I'm going to actually create another widget item so you can see what that looks like on the system as far as being able to create a dashboard item, but we're also going to create a pivot table. All right, so if we look at this and you say, you know what, I want to create the 12 key items, I'm actually going to go here. And if I have rights, I'm going to put it in design mode. Okay, and I'm going to add a new widget. So I'm going to scroll down, add a new widget. And I'm going to do this as a, we're going to do this as a chart, but we can see here, we can add data tables, which are basically the listings we see here. We can do embedded pages. So if we have like a link to a bank, we can do that, those kind of things. We can create a header to kind of make our page a little bit more organized, kind of like what it says customer view up in the upper right or upper left-hand side, in my other right. You can actually kind of take a look at that. If we go down a little bit further, we can link to different workspaces, which are based on the menus. So we can actually say, you know what, I want to create, 5 links to go to my key items, but people don't do that one too often because there's different ways to do it. We can actually add a pivot table directly to the dashboard. If we have Power BI, we can actually add a Power BI and embed it into the dashboard so we can view it there. And then if we want a trend card KPI, we can do that. And then we can put a wiki page in here. But I'm going to do a chart. I'm just going to click next. Okay, and I'm going to pick the inquiry screen, and that particular one was the invoiced items, which is the one we just looked at. Okay, so I'm going to type that, and it's going to come up with my list. Click select, and then within that, I can say, what do I want to do? Well, I don't want all records. I want just the key customers for the last 12 months, and select that. And from here, I can still then say, you know what, I want to adjust that a little bit. I can play with it. I can take these dates different, et cetera. But I'm going to leave that as such. How often do I want it to refresh? Well, in this case here, the data may, we can set it to refresh, every 30 minutes. We can continually. It could be one of those things where it happens once a day. It's just meant to help improve performance. I'm going to leave that as 30 minutes. And then we got to configure it. So we have to tell it what we want it to do. So in the configuration, we have different types of charts. So we have donuts and lines and columns and stack columns. And if we go down a little bit further, you'll see bars, stack bars, funnels, et cetera. I'm going to do something simple. I'm just going to do a column. All right. Now the column, notice my options changed a little bit, and I'm going to do a legend, and I'm going to do a pop-up. Well, actually, I'm going to phrase that differently. So I'm going to go here and put in customer name for my legend, okay, because that's what we want to actually kind of group it by. How many? We're going to do 10. We're going to keep it pretty simple. We want to group it by the date. So I'm going to type date. So we're going to do invoice date. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to let that be legend. Again, 10's fine for that. We're going to come down here a little bit more, date rounding. What do we want to do? Well, we're going to round it to the nearest month. We're fine with the year, month. So we're going to display it the way it shows there. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about colors. We're going to let the system select that. And you know what? I'm going to do the amount of the transaction. So basically, I'm going to do the extended amount. I'm going to sum it. And what format do I want? Yeah, we're going to do 00. Okay, nearest penny. Okay. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to put a title on it. And we're going to keep it simple. JK test is good. And we're going to put in 0623 2021. Click finish. So at this point, we've added our graph. And I'm going to actually just drag this out a little bit because we want it to be a little bit bigger. And we're going to let that drop. And at this point, I can undo my design, and that's done. Now, the nice part about it is the drill down works already. I don't have to do anything for that. So for example, if I look at this month by month, I say, you know, that doesn't look right for August. I can click on that, and that will show me USA Bartending School, the month of August. All right, so the nice part about it is it all drills down, it all works. It becomes very, very powerful for us to be able to do that analysis, okay, and see it. So the idea is I didn't have to program that, it just works. If we go a little bit further, okay, I'm just going to do one more thing, and then we're going to kind of set you free here. But we have the ability to do pivot tables within the system. So in this case here, I'm actually going to take this and go all records. We're going to do it kind of this way. Customization, I'm going to create a pivot table. What do I want to call it? I'm going to call it something tricky like, we'll call it items sold by state. How's that? We'll do it that way. Oops, helps if I type on the window. Oops. My keyboard just went dead, I think. Apparently I can't do that. That's the end of my keyboard typing. Don't know what's going on. Anyway, I guess I won't show you that, but it allows you to do this. So in this case here, you can see here's the items pivoted by customer class. If I view the pivot, unfortunately, I can't show you the one I was going to show you, which was based on by state, which is a little cleaner. But in this case here, we can see the actual sales by the class. And keep in mind, if you're familiar with using within the system, the pivot tables work almost the same as they do in Excel. So if you're familiar with using it in Excel, it's very easy to be able to use it here because it's really kind of very much a similar scenario. So we can see here the quantities we had for each one. And again, the drill down works from here. So if I click on this, I can actually see what makes up that total. So the idea of it is once you're doing something, those things are all kind of predefined for us and they work very well. Okay, so anyway, I'm just gonna look and see if we have any quick questions here. I think we had most of the questions kind of all squared away. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. I'm gonna wrap up for today. But the idea is I wanted to show you a little bit more in depth of what the system can do a little bit for us and for you so that you can actually function kind of more efficiently. Right, so feel free to reach out to us and that kind of wraps up for today. We can take a couple questions if anybody has any. If not, we can kind of let everybody free for the day. Okay, looks like we're good. And we'll go from there. All right, you guys have a great day. Thank you for attending. We appreciate your time and effort. And I hope this enlightens you as to how Acumatica can work for you. Thanks now.